Hello, imaginary internet friends. I'm Mild Kratz, and technical difficulties be damned, we're going to do this thing. I promised a little while ago I was going to do a series on Superman, and I intend to do that. Today we're going to talk about the Max Fleischer 1940s Superman cartoon. We're going to take a look at a few clips from, I think, the 11th episode called Showdown. And yeah, I'm going to provide some interesting notes about the cartoon and make fun of it some. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look.
Up in the sky! Look! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
Alright, so let's take a few notes from that intro there. Firstly, Paramount Pictures I don't think I have a copyright claim from yet, so that'll be good, trying to collect those. Secondly, Superman is seen flying there, which is interesting because this is the first time Superman's ever flown. The reason these cartoons were made in the first place was based on the popularity of the comic books. And in the comic books, he could only just leap tall buildings and stuff. If you watch the other parts of the intro, they comment on that, but then you see him fly. And in large parts of the cartoon series, he flies. And that was a first for Superman, so that's another thing that's really cool and important about this whole cartoon series. Something else there that I feel like is worth noting is that back in the 1940s, birds and planes looked really similar, and were both really easily confused with Superman. Apparently. So in this episode of the cartoon Showdown, Superman faces off against an imposter Superman who's performing a number of felonious activities, mostly burglary, across Metropolis, stealing things like cash, jewelry, and the like. And yeah, I don't know, it's a good episode. I remember it pretty fondly from being a kid. I watched a lot of these on some kind of weird VHS tape that had 200 cartoons on it, but I distinctly remember this episode mostly because I like the idea of Superman taking on someone else also dressed up as Superman, pretending to be Superman. And yeah, I don't know, I've said Superman a lot in that last sentence. Let's just take a look.
Stupid. It's about time you showed up. Come on, hand it over.
Okay, boss. Here it is. This is a swell racket, boss. And the Superman outfit, it works like a charm. Gee, boss, it was only a fin.
Next time, it'll be a Mickey fin.
Okay, so let's have a Mild Kratz play-by-play of what we just watched. The imposter Superman comes back to the headquarters where he meets his boss, who calls him stupid, even though when I was a kid thought I'd called him Stubin for some reason. Obviously called him stupid. And just to emphasize that point, I went ahead and zoomed in on the guy's face, who everyone is confusing apparently as Superman, even though the guy looks like a complete dimwit. Then the scene gets kind of weirdly sexually harassy when the boss is obviously checking out the imposter Superman's junk and notices that he's taking some money. And the imposter Superman says, "Oh, don't worry, boss, it was only a fin." And then the boss says, "You're lucky it wasn't a Mickey fin," which I had to look up, even though obviously everyone knows what that terminology means. Basically, Mickey Fin is a psychoactive drug that eventually became known, just more colloquially, as the Mickey, or slipping someone a Mickey or a roofie. So that's a really weird scene that, in kind of a weird retrospective now, doesn't hold up very well, and is kind of gross, or weird.
Friend turns foe. Well, that's ridiculous. It couldn't be Superman. What do you make of it, Clark?
Hey, you two. The editor wants you to cover the opera tonight. And don't forget, it's formal.
Good. Now I can wear my new evening gown.
All right, Mild Kratz here to interrupt again. Just to explain a few things. The series of papers banded together were called newspapers for the younger people out there who have never seen a newspaper before. It's kind of like how old people get their news, and they would also like get coupons and stuff out of it too. And then the opera. The opera is like Hamilton, except really fancy, and people would wear like suits and ties and stuff. And then also I think that other character in this scene is supposed to be Jimmy Olsen, who they've made like cool and edgy and like probably in a way of apologizing for some of the older racist stuff in Superman, African American now, which is cool. I think in his most recent depiction in Supergirl. But yeah, anyway, those are just a few things that I thought were probably confusing to a younger audience. I do really like that transition at the end, though, where he's like straightening his tie and then all of a sudden they're at the opera, which is probably also really important, seeing as how, again, this entire cartoon is only 11 minutes long. Okay, so in the next few scenes, we're in the opera. Clark is falling asleep because it's really funny that the opera is boring, and so he's falling asleep. Back in the 1940s, that was considered humor. And anyway, the imposter Superman is going around stealing people's necklaces and pocket watches and things until he fumbles and falls into Lois Lane, and they have a scuffle. And she rips the S logo off of imposter Superman's chest, and then considers that to be irrefutable evidence that has to be the real Superman, because you can't just wear a costume that has like an S on the shirt, and then, like that, there's only one of those, and apparently Superman has it. But that becomes irrefutable evidence that she decides to phone the police. And Clark takes this as a sign to go to the roof and face off against his imposter.
Well, my double's in for some trouble.
And so anyway, Clark goes up to the roof, gives his awesome one-liner about double trouble, and then reappears as Superman, who says nothing. The bad guy shoots at Superman a couple times, which has no effect, shoots at him a couple more times, and again, nothing happens because he's Superman. But I think it's important to note that this is back in 1941 or 42, I forget this episode specifically, but it's at the introduction of Superman, so I know that it's kind of like a dumb trope now to be like, why would you ever shoot at Superman? Because everyone knows he's bulletproof and everything, you're just wasting time and bullets. But at the time, people didn't know that about Superman, I think. So I think this still counts as being like a good idea for the criminal here. And then, miraculously, he throws his gun at Superman, it explodes and kills him. So, that was kind of a weird direction for them to go back in 1942. They don't very often kill Superman as a character, and then usually when they do, it's with the intent to bring him back. And yeah, they just killed him. And if you don't think that's really how this episode ends, I encourage you to go find it and watch it. All of these cartoons are pretty cool, but you have to watch them definitely through a very specific 1940s lens where you think, I'm glad we've made progress as a society. Some of the things that are represented here are not good. And I'll go into probably more episodes of the cartoon series, but it is definitely problematic. But this has been The Showdown, and I've been Mild Kratz. So thank you very much for tuning in, and until next time, what's my catchphrase again? Stay mild or something. I don't know. Whatever. See you around.